Welcome everyone. I hope you've enjoyed some sunshine of some sorts, even if it's just through your window today, but it's a lovely day, and welcome to today's Community Sector Roundtable. My name is Kate Simons and I'm the Chairperson of the Essential Services Commission. To start, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners on all the lands we're meeting on today and pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging. I'd like to acknowledge the connection that Indigenous Australians hold to country and culture. We last met at the start of September, hard to believe, now it's the 22nd of October, and particularly for those of us in metropolitan Melbourne, it's felt like a very long spring. I'd like to particularly acknowledge everyone who has had caring responsibilities through this time, and for those like me with school-aged children, I know the return to face-to-face learning last week was very welcome. So I won't have any children knocking at the door this time around, so that's good. At our last meeting on the 3rd of September, we heard from you that consumers are experiencing challenges in trying to access concessions, that financial counsellors are experiencing challenges when acting on behalf of their clients. The reduction in job seeker and JobKeeper continued to be a concern. There were ongoing concerns about those who are not eligible for government assistance, and young people in particular appeared to be at a higher risk of accumulating debt due to job and income loss related to the economic impact of the pandemic. For example, the exclusion of international students, people on temporary or bridging visas, and people seeking asylum have been highlighted from the beginning as an issue for concern. We've also heard concerns about issues with matching concession details with account holder information, concessions not being applied properly or ending unexpectedly, and eligible concession holders not receiving entitlements. As we know from our own campaigns, we know that young people are also less likely to seek help, and they've been the hardest hit by job losses since the pandemic began, and they've had fewer savings to fall back on. So as we start to look forward to coming out of this extended period of lockdown, we're really keen to understand from your perspectives what the road ahead looks like. And I'm looking forward to hearing from you about what's front of mind for you and what we might need to consider in the coming weeks and months. By way of introductions, I'd like to introduce my fellow commissioners, senior leaders and commission staff members who are here today and who like me, are very keen to hear from you. If you could turn on your cameras and give us a wave. My fellow commissioners, Simon Corden, and I think Rebecca Billings will be joining us, if she's not already online, just a little bit later today, so Rebecca will join us later. Commissioner Burjani also sends his apologies but could not be here today. Our CEO, John Hamill, our Executive Director of Energy, Sarah McDowell, our Executive Director of Price Monitoring and Regulation, Marcus Crudden, our Director of Victoria Energy Upgrades, Jess Safai, our Customer Engagement Project Manager, Lucy Weston, our Project Leads on Consumer Vulnerability, Jess and Kat. I'd also like to welcome our attendees for today so everyone knows who's in the room. From community and consumer organisations, welcome Emma O'Neill and Carl Barrett from Consumer Policy Research Centre, Emma DeCampo from the Brotherhood of St Lawrence, Jared Len from the Victorian Council of Social Service, Kira Sterling from Thriving Communities Partnership, Jared Brody, Patrick Solian and Luke Lavelle from the Consumer Action Law Centre, Lynn Dundon from Financial Counselling Victoria, Cynthia Gabert and Janine Rayner from Energy and Water Ombudsman Victoria, Dominic Schipano from the Council of Small Business Organisations Australia, Katie Ho from Justice Connect, Melissa Hardham from West Justice, although I'm not sure, maybe she was going to be able to join us today. Not sure if Melissa's there. Leanne Carter from Victorian Aboriginal Legal Service, and Tanya Clark from Women's Legal Service Victoria. And I'm not sure whether Jill Wilson from Community Information and Support Victoria has been able to join us, but hello there if you are, Jill. Good. In terms of observers, we also have representatives from the Australian Energy Regulator, from the Department of Environment, Land, Water and Planning, Department of Treasury and Finance and Department of Health and Human Services. So welcome everyone. I would just also like to acknowledge Melissa and Darcy are from West Justice, so they are both apologies today, so Melissa's not with us either. We were very sad to hear the news that their colleague Sky Hawkins has very sadly passed away. I didn't know Sky, but many in our team worked with her closely and spoke highly of her fantastic work. Sky made an important contribution to our work on family violence, providing advice and facilitating one of our workshops on financial abuse and family violence. We send our condolences and best wishes to those who knew her well. Before we get into the agenda, some quick housekeeping. Please note we're recording today's session so we can share within the Commission. If you have any questions while someone's talking, please type them in the chat function to share in the group in case we can't get around to everyone. And if you want to ask a question, please raise your hand in the chat bar at the bottom of your screen or wave on the screen to me as well. Please keep your microphone muted when not speaking to avoid feedback and background noise. Now, there's a few items on the agenda today. I'm very keen to get to it. So we would like to begin as usual hearing from you. If you can keep your updates to 2 to 3 minutes, that would be great so we can get around the virtual table. Then we're going to hear from Ting Yuan from the Department of Energy, Land, Water and Planning. Ting is here to give us an update on the Victorian Government's $3.7 million energy assistance package announced earlier this year by Minister D'Ambrosio. After that, we'll hear from Katie Ho from Justice Connect to talk about the work they're doing during this pandemic with a focus on housing and financial security. Hopefully we'll have time I'd like to provide a brief update on the Commission's work and a snapshot of latest data from retailers. And then hopefully we'll spend 10 minutes on any questions you have at the end and close the meeting at 4:30. So on that note, I'd like to begin by asking our community sector representatives to provide us with a 2-minute update on what you're seeing on the ground. And for organisations providing an update later on, Brotherhood of Justice Connect, Brotherhood of St Lawrence, Consumer Policy Research Centre and Financial Counselling Victoria, we might ask you to include any points you'd like to raise at that stage when you present. We might kick off then with Jared Len from the Victorian Council of Social Service. Hello, Jared.
Thank you, Kate. Hello, everyone. It's Jared speaking. I suppose wanting to keep as much time for those frontline reflections and insights as possible. One thing I would flag with the group is that VCOS has published our supplementary suggestions to government on what the 2020 budget could look like, and that does include calling for a little bit of additional financial assistance, particularly mindful of the energy bill impacts of this year and the wafer-thin margins that people had coming into COVID. We also flagged the need for energy efficiency work and the potential impact of digital divide as things to be watching. So there'd be the main additional points, Kate, and leave others to speak to the frontline experience.
Great, thanks very much, Jared. And great to see Kira Sterling from Thriving Communities Partnership here today. Hi, Kira.
Hi, Kate. Again, I think the Frontline has some really good data. We caught up yesterday with Food Bank, and one of the things that I think is relevant to note here is Food Bank have seen a 25% increase of people seeking food since the government supplements have rolled back in September. That is a very telling sign, and I think they're also indicating another 41% increase by the time that the supplements have completed their rollback in March. So that's a really important factor, I think, for us to note. We had a gut feel of the problems we're about to see. That's I think the first evidence piece that I've seen so far that indicates that. The other thing that happened today was the rollout of the digital inclusion report from Telstra. And that's showing really clear indications through the COVID crisis that affordability is one of the key drivers of lack of accessibility to digital. It's also saying 1 in 5 Australians don't have a personal computer, so they're managing internet through their phone. So that's critical for retailers to understand in how they're engaging with people, I think, as well, because there's a huge cost involved if they're using data from their phone. And also there's a big, obviously digital divide with people, older people in the community. And the other thing that came out of Food Bank, which organisations I think should be conscious of, is that people between the age of 18 and 25 were by far the biggest cohort of our community that were accessing food support, which again is the canary in the coal mine. So that's my little snapshot, but I know my learned colleagues will have a lot more.
Thanks very much, Kira, for sharing. We might go to Consumer Action Law Centre next. Jared, Patrick and Luke.
Who wants to? You go, Patrick.
Kate, I think we're going to speak in the next section, so we might hold over as well.
Yes.
Yeah, let's do that.
Unless you want to say something quickly, you're most welcome.
We'll hold over.
All good. All right. Yeah, you'll have an opportunity later. Thank you. Cynthia and Janine from Energy and Water Ombudsman Victoria, welcome.
Thanks, Kate. Our complaint volumes in October did kick up a little bit more than they had. They're still very much below what we would have expected and even below the volumes that we were receiving this time last year, but they have started to taper back down again. Most of that seasonal high billing, with gas billing being the big issue. We are seeing some un-COVID related impacts that I suppose are just things to be aware of in terms of utility affordability, where businesses are starting to try and clean up any potential back bill problems they may have had before the 1 January changes coming in, which would limit the back billing provisions. So, they will start to give people a fright. If they didn't have a high bill already, a back bill will definitely bring utility affordability into focus and obviously challenge retailers to then really think critically and deeply about what payment assistance they can offer these customers. We're still continuing to see some consumers having trouble accessing the utility relief grant scheme. So it'd be interesting to see how much of that drops off as retailers really start living into the requirement to be assisting consumers to apply for ERGs, and the changes that the Commission's brought in about that.
Thanks, Cynthia. A few things for our energy team to be really aware of as we focus our, our energies on, looking at how businesses are assisting consumers and any issues that come out of those reforms that from the 1st of January as well. Thanks, Cynthia. Welcome, Dominic, from the Council of Small Business Organisations Australia. Hi, Dominic.
Hi, thank you, Kate. And yes, Cynthia hit a couple of the points I was going to cover, so well done, Cynthia. Yeah, we're finding that small business are going to really face the brick wall, if you like, as soon as this pandemic is, closed down and the business start to open up. The other issue that's starting to creep in, apart from the high bill, back bill, is that, if there is going to be any price increase in the new year for energy, I think that's going to have a bit of an impact as well. So just keep an eye on any CPI increases by energy companies. I think people are starting to worry about that as well. And the last point is that, there's still that 30% of businesses who won't open up. What does that mean for the energy company in terms of revenue? And so is that going to have an impact on price as well?
Thanks for that, Dominic. Katie from Justice Connect, you're talking later, so we might, you're welcome to talk now if you'd like to, otherwise we can leave you to the session.
I'm happy to pass and talk later. Thanks.
Okay, thanks Katie. Leanne Carter from the Victorian Aboriginal Legal Service. Welcome, Leanne. Maybe we don't have Leanne here yet. Kat or Jess? No. Okay.
Don't think Leanne's here yet. Yeah.
Okay. If she pops on later, feel free to let me know, and we can go back to Leanne. The other, I'm not sure if Jill Wilson was able to join us from the Community Information and Support Victoria. No, Jess is shaking her head as well. That was actually the list of organisations to go through, other than those that we'll be presenting later. But if I've forgotten anyone in that list, can you please make yourself known? Or if you'd like to add any other reflections. Anything from observers should also feel welcome to pop some thoughts in there as well, or anyone from the Commission too. We might, on that basis, then thank you for those reflections. They're always been a very useful part of these roundtables. I've found them very, very useful for I can't believe this is number 6, but thank you very much for sharing those directly with us, and we'll pick up on some of those themes as we go into the next couple of sessions. Now let's move on to an update from Ting. Welcome, Ting. Ting's here to give us an update on the Victorian Government's energy assistance package announced earlier this year by the Minister. And that package included funding for an energy brokerage program, new financial counsellors, and online training for more than 1,100 frontline community workers being delivered by the Consumer Policy Research Centre, Brotherhood of St Lawrence and Financial Counselling Victoria. Ting is going to say a few words and then hand over to the partners. If you're having any questions for our speakers, just feel free to hold them until the question part of our agenda, and you can pop your questions in your chat or put your hand up later. That'd be great. I might hand over to you now. Thank you, Ting.
Thanks, Kate. Hi, everyone. My name is Ting, and I'm the Senior Manager of the Energy Affordability Team within Energy Programs at DELP. And our team is leading the implementation of the $3.7 million utility hardship support package that was announced by the Minister back in May. So I guess the key objective, as some of you may already know the program, but the key objective of the package was back earlier this year when we went into lockdown. The key concern is with everyone working from home and loss of jobs, loss of income, people on how that impacted on people's ability to pay their energy bills, and for those who might be at risk of disconnection. So given the robust payment difficulty framework Victoria does have, we wanted to make sure that energy consumers know where to go for information, where to go for support, and know what their rights are under the payment difficulty framework. So the key objective of the package is to make that connection between energy consumers and community service organisations to raise awareness, provide information, and provide more in-depth support. So there are 3 programs under the package, each targeting different cohorts with different, I guess, extent of intervention to suit the circumstances and the needs of the energy consumers. So as Kate outlined, the supports vary from information dissemination, such as online training, which is delivered by CPRC, to the energy assistance program, which includes advice about switching, as well as energy efficiency, as well as more in-depth support with how to read one's bill, and also additional resources to boost the existing financial counselling program in Victoria with 10 additional financial counselling positions. So we've got all the delivery partners online, and I should also give a shout out to Calc. So FCVIC is, I guess, part of the delivery in terms of professional development of the financial counsellors, but Calc will be able to speak to a little bit more about what's actually happening on the ground and some of the trends and insights that they are seeing. So I'll hand over to all the delivery partners to give you guys a bit more of an overview and a status update.
Are we handing over to CPRC first?
Sure.
Okay.
Hello, thanks for having me. So we're delivering 2 sets of webinars. One's for community workers to really equip them to handle clients who are having difficulty paying their bills. They go for about 40 minutes with a 20-minute Q&A session at the end. And then the second set of webinars we're delivering are directly to households, and that's around the 4 simple actionable steps that they can implement to take back control of their bill. I think there's still a lack of trust as soon as the word energy is mentioned, so we'd really appreciate any warm referrals, particularly to households, about the webinars. We're just starting on a second media campaign now, so there'll be some ads on 3AW, some paid advertorial in the Herald Sun, and as well as some paid social media advertising. So the other thing I should mention, so we're scheduling webinars every week. So there's 3 household sessions, 2 worker sessions every week. But in addition to that, we can also hold individual webinars for certain groups or organisations. So we'd be really keen to talk to you about running those specific events.
Thanks very much, Carl. Yes, I'm keen to engage with you on that. I think Kat and Jess will possibly liaise with you about what that might look like. So thanks very much, Carl.
Thank you.
Great to see you enjoying some sunshine as well. We might now turn to Brotherhood of St Lawrence. And is Emma there today?
I'm here. Thanks, Kate. Hi, everyone. My name is Emma DeCampo, and I'm the project manager at the Brotherhood of St Lawrence. And as Ting mentioned, we're one of the 3 organisations, delivering the Energy Assistance Program. So just a bit of the basic rundown of the program. So we're going to be assisting 3,000 eligible households with energy issues. And those energy issues include hardship-related difficulties, finding people better offers, and energy efficiency information and advice. And I'll come back and provide a bit more information about those types of assistance in a moment. The program is free, it's delivered over the phone and completely independent of energy companies, and we're running operational now, and the program runs through till the end of August of 2021. As I mentioned, there's 3 partners delivering the project, so that's the Brotherhood of St Lawrence, the Australian Energy Foundation and Uniting. So a little bit more about the way that we can assist people. So the first that I mentioned is with hardship related issues. So that's things like applying for a utility relief grant, entry into the retailer's payment difficulty program, having concessions backdated and applied, and also some basic budgeting support, so around working out what payment plans are affordable. The second kind of grouping of assistance is helping people to switch to better and cheaper energy offers. So that's done using Victorian Energy Compare. And we do actually call up the retailer with the participant and help to complete that switching process. And just to mention, in terms of the switching, we ran a similar type service just focused on switching last year, and we're able to see some really significant savings to households that participated. So the average saving for a household that switched electricity was $270 and $500 for households that switched both their gas and electricity. So we're hoping to be able to deliver similar type savings to people we help switch through this service. The final groupings of assistance are around energy efficiency information and advice, and also some guidance on how to better understand your energy bill. So quite practical things there about like being able to check that concession that the person is eligible for is being applied. We do link in with other support services if people need them. So for example, local financial counsellors and the National Debt Helpline where applicable, as well as emergency relief providers if the individual needs more immediate support around paying their bill. Just finally, just want to run through the eligibility criteria. So there's quite a few different criteria, and just to note that an individual only needs to meet one of these, definitely not all of them. So I'll just read through this list. Someone is experiencing hardship as a result of COVID-19, including people receiving job seeker or job keeper, is people eligible for a state government energy concession, anyone with a health or disability consideration, including mental health issues, anyone experiencing energy bill stress. So for example, having difficulty by paying their bills, behind in their bills, being part of a retailer hardship program, people with any literacy or numeracy difficulties, and finally, people who are receiving a Commonwealth Home Support Package. Wanted to mention that we do have interpreter services available. So for COLD participants, that's not an issue. And we're really keen to, similar to Carl, I think as Carl mentioned, to get some more referrals of participants. So if you have clients who you think could benefit, absolutely send them our way. So participants can contact us directly, and I think my colleague David has popped in the chat the contact details there, so that's for if participants want to contact us directly, fantastic, they can. Alternatively, if you have a group that you send newsletter to, or an email or something like that, and you'd like to inform them about this service, please just let me know. So send me an email and we can provide some materials and content for you to send out to your folks. So that's about it from me. Thanks a lot.
That's great. Thanks very much, Emma. That was really informative, and I'm sure everybody's really glad to have those details. And thank you, David, for putting those on the chat. I'm sure there'll probably be a few questions coming out of that for you at the end. So look forward to that discussion. Might turn to Calc now. Jared, did you want to give a bit of an update now on Calc's involvement?
Well, maybe we'll go Sandy first to talk about their aspects of the project, and then we'll pass over to Patrick, I think, is going to lead our part of the project. Yeah. Sure,
no worries, all good. All right, we might go to Sandy or Lynn from Financial Counselling Victoria.
Yeah, hi, and thanks, Kate. Yeah, and thanks, Jared, too. And we will flick across to Patrick in a moment. So we're doing a bunch of different bits and pieces in the project. Some of it's around professional development and training for financial counsellors. We've also reinvigorated our utilities working group, which brings together financial counsellors with particular issue-based focus and interest on energy issues in particular, and that's going to help foster some of our systemic advocacy kind of capacities in the area. In amongst that mix, of course, we're also working to build the links and the close links really with CPIC and the brokerage service. In particular, it's really important, I think, to construct those links and relationships to enhance the referral processes and those sorts of things. I mean, of course, people who are struggling with energy debt or energy bills will often have a wider framework of financial difficulties that need to be addressed beyond that. So those links are very important from a financial counselling perspective. Probably the major thing I wanted to mention apart from that was we held an energy hardship forum last week, which is one of a series of forums that we've been holding with different industry sectors around the way in which hardship is evolving in the COVID situation. And that was focused on engaging and linking between financial counsellors and predominantly the energy retailers, although we had a couple of water people also attend that meeting. And that was a very constructive sort of engagement. A bunch of issues and questions were raised by the financial counsellors at that meeting for a range of the energy retailers. And I can say that the people involved included AGL, Energy Australia, Origin, Power Shop, Momentum, Alinta Energy and Red Energy. And apart from, in addition, some of the water, Vic Water as the Peak and Yarra Valley and City West Water were also involved. So some of the key sorts of issues that were raised or questions raised by financial counsellors were just about what hardship was looking like for energy customers in both rural and metropolitan areas, the kinds of tailored response or options that they're prepared to put on the table for individual customers, how they're working at implementing the access to ERGs, Utility Relief Grant Scheme, and how could the ERG system be improved, and how they're dealing in particular in the Victorian context, given not all these organisations were Victorian based specifically around COVID issues, and in particular also what plans they have for particular disadvantaged cohorts. For example, people on centre pay, or people in zero income, people who might be unemployed, or people who are in other sort of areas of disadvantage or vulnerability. So we're in the process now of writing up the outcomes of that event, and I'd like to thank Kira especially, because Thriving Communities Partnership helped us pull that together and help facilitate the day. A couple of other issues that were raised in the conversations looked at things like authorisations and how authorisations are working, and access, financial counsellors and also customer access to hardship, and sort of issues around, I guess, consistency in outcomes as well. I mean, the tendency for financial counsellors to be able to get better outcomes than a customer ringing up would actually be able to get on their own. And again, that challenge for energy retailers in promoting a consistent and good practice response to hardship. So those are the sorts of things that event sort of covered. And I'm conscious, of course, that the funding for this this stuff. It's not just for us. It was for, as Ting mentioned, for building capacity in terms of financial counsellors in the sector, and consumer action is a key area which has gotten funding from that side of it. So that's right to the point, which I should throw over to Patrick.
Thanks, Sandy. Yeah, so as most of you know, we've got a legal and financial counselling service at CULC. We assist consumers in Victoria with different issues, including energy debt and hardship. And the policy team I'm in work closely with CULC's caseworkers, but also financial counsellors across the state to identify and highlight and hopefully fix the systemic problems we see. So we've received some of this funding to build on our existing policy advocacy and to try and feed back the issues that we're seeing to industry regulators like the ESC and government. We've recently recruited another policy officer to work on energy issues. So I might quickly get Luke to say g'day.
Thanks, Patrick. And yeah, hi to everyone. As Patrick mentioned, I've just recently started a few weeks ago with CULC, and really we'll be focusing on energy hardship and making sure that we're bringing across those issues that financial counsellors and other community workers are raising, and making sure those are going through to regulators and industry as well. So really looking forward to getting more involved in that work.
Thanks, Luke. Yeah, so we've seen an increase in the proportion of calls to financial counsellors at the NDH where energy is being flagged as an issue. And we've seen that since March, so when COVID started impacting the community. We're also concerned, as others are, that as government stimulus measures are rolled back, we'll see an even greater number of people calling our line. A bit like EWOV, we've seen a decrease in overall numbers, but we're worried about that picking up as assistance wound back. And yeah, we're working closely, with our FCs and more broadly across the state through forums like FC VIX Utilities Working Group, which brings together financial counsellors and ourselves, and other consumer advocates throughout the state and nationally, I should say. Next, I'll chat a bit about current issues as well that we're seeing. Front of mind for us is we're hearing from a lot of customers that aren't getting good assistance when they're in contact with their retailers. So front of mind for us is trying to fix that and make sure consumers are receiving meaningful and helpful assistance when they are in touch with retailers about different financial difficulties they're experiencing. So we're hearing from a lot of people about consistently poor engagement with retailers, and I'll just run through some of those. So we're hearing various retailers not accepting proposed affordable payment plans. So some consumers are putting forward certain amounts, whether that's $20 a week or more, to paying off an energy debt. And hearing retailers either reject that. We heard a consumer report that a retailer said the system wouldn't allow them to enter that amount, which is obviously pretty problematic for us. And yeah, we're hearing that across a number of retailers. And I've just got a case study. So a person that we're calling Ality called us a couple of weeks ago because she was threatened with disconnection, and she also had one of these, an unaffordable payment plan. Her income's been severely impacted by COVID, so she works seasonally, and her work hasn't picked up after winter, so she's struggling with bills, including energy. She owed about $800 to her energy retailer, and she told us that she got a letter saying they would disconnect her if she didn't pay the outstanding amount. She got in touch with the retailer after receiving that letter, and she tried to negotiate an affordable payment plan, but she ended up coming away from that call on a a plan of paying $120 per week to avoid disconnection, which she told our financial counsellor that she just couldn't afford. So yeah, that's one of the examples we're seeing. We're also seeing no discussion of payment plans if people are getting in touch about not being able to pay a bill. And we've also heard retailers threatening to send bills to debt collectors if the amount is not paid by the due date. CALC's been working with some other bodies, working with the AER, the Australian Energy Regulator, on their statement of expectations. So the first one came out in March at the start of COVID, and there's been a second one, and the third one is expected at the end of this month. And the statement of expectations, as I see it, is really trying to get energy retailers to step up at this time and help people in the community. We've got some concerns about this next statement of expectations. So we've seen a draft, and we're worried about retailers, I guess, not providing meaningful, prompt or thoughtful assistance when consumers are in touch with them. And yeah, really worried about disconnection and debt collection resuming. And to that end, I'll wrap up, but we'd strongly encourage the ESC to perhaps take its own position on the statement of expectations, given that Victoria is in quite a different position with the lockdown ongoing. And we've also got the payment difficulty framework, of course, in this state, which puts, I guess, better protections in place for consumers, and just want to make sure that that aligns with the updated statement of expectations. Thanks.
Patrick, I might just add one other point, if I may, Kate, and that just relates to the utility relief grant scheme. We are also still receiving calls from people who are having issues accessing utility relief grants, and we appreciate the changes that the ESC's made to put a greater obligation on retailers, which we think the obligations are really good, but we probably think that needs to be some extra efforts to, I guess, implement that well so it becomes a reality. So for example, I've got a case study here of somebody recently who had made an ERG application, but has been back in touch with his retailer that was 2 months ago, and he's back in touch with his retailer 4 times and he can't get any sense of what's going on with it. And I've heard from retailers that they're finding that a bit frustrating as well, that they are helping people through the process, but then they have no insight into the progress with the application. And so when people call back, the retailer can't tell them anything about the progress. And that creates a lot of confusion and frustration, and then they end up calling us. So I just wonder, whether there's an opportunity to, I guess, think about how we can, with DHHS, sort of make that much more a streamlined process. The other issue related to it, as I understand, is that the application is quite intensive. Even it was obviously intensive when it fell onto the consumer to fill it in, and that's why we saw low proportions of people filling it out. But people have to stay on the line quite a long time with their retailer to fill it in for them to submit it. And I just wonder whether surely that can be streamlined. So yeah, we'd encourage, think about whether there's opportunity to kind of what further efforts can be made to put the ESC's hopes with that change into reality.
Thanks very much, Jared and Patrick, and welcome Luke as well. Great to see you and your involvement in this. You've raised a number of issues there, ERGs related as well as payment plan related, and I think there are probably some focus areas for the Commission to think about engaging with businesses as well on those. And Sarah, I can see you there on the screen listening to all of this. I just also wondered, DHHS is online, not to put you on the spot, but did DHHS want to add anything into the conversation about the ERGs process and where that might, I guess, present an opportunity for some tweaks to make sure that, it's working in consumers' benefit. Is that you, Layla?
Yeah, sure. Hi, everyone. Yeah, just happy to collaborate, Gerard, or with anybody in terms of just adding any additional improvements there is. Yeah, so just happy to do that at the moment. But just to give in terms of a little bit of a feedback that, the ERGS process at the moment, we haven't heard any information that it's not going well. The timelines are still being met, and the processing is going through from a consumer component. But obviously from what Gerard's raised, we need to collaborate with the retailers and see how we can support them a bit further.
Hey, if I can step in, I might just say it was clear from the interactions at our forum that the retailers have some frustrations or concerns with the workability of the process, and we've been saying for really since a year ago to DHHS and others that there's a real need to get a collaborative event together where the retailers and DHHS and the financial counsellors are in a room and work through the process. It's a complex process. There's a lot of moving parts to it, and there's a real need for a collaborative effort to really get an understanding of
Thanks, Sam. I might have just lost you at the end, but I think I got the gist of what you were suggesting. Sounds like there's an opportunity. Maybe Sarah, did you want an opportunity to respond to that?
There's a couple of things. The first thing, I'd be interested to hear whether you're hearing the same noises from the water businesses, because obviously the water businesses have been doing this much longer than the energy retailers, and certainly have given reflections to the Commission, and indeed at forums we've had previously when we were undertaking this reform process, reflected to the energy businesses that it was a relatively straightforward process to take forward. So I'd be really keen to hear from you all whether you're hearing the same reflections from the water businesses. So that's, I suppose, the first reflection. The second point in relation to guidance and further workshops with industry, absolutely. Many of you would know Anne Randalls, who has been engaged in our team with a focus on industry engagement, and has been running already a number of workshops, and certainly we're keen to partner with any of your groups in terms of engaging with your stakeholders on the messages. A key focus for us has been that engagement piece with financial counsellors and legal centres, and supporting them navigate our regulatory framework. So we're in a better position to support yourselves, and you're in a better position to support your clients get access to the entitlements, particularly obviously the new entitlements at this point in time. Kate, I assume we'll touch on the disconnection piece a bit later.
We can pick it up on that now if you'd like, if we want to respond to Patrick's concerns. Did you want to kick off on that, or would you like me to?
Either way.
Okay, Sarah, just before perhaps you do that, just to respond to the issue about water, because I think that's a really good point you're making. It's exactly the same point that we've raised with the energy retailers when we spoke to them about this issue, that the water retailers seem to be able to do this quite well. What's the issue? I mean, they say that they've got so many more customers. That's the thing, that are getting access, and that's the problem. I don't know about that. That's what they say. So I just thought I'd say that. The other thing to say about water, some might be aware that the water retailers are really interested in trying to improve automating concessions. So not so much the utility relief grant, but the the general concession. And then maybe there's some more work that can be done there to kind of make sure that the concession process is simpler, so that people don't have to keep applying or going into the retailer, but the system just works behind the scenes. So it can pick up. It knows. I think it's probably easier to work with water, but maybe energy as well. So that there's all this effort across government to make better use of citizen data, and for their benefit, there might be an effort to focus on automating the concession processes.
Sorry, just to jump in on what Jared just said, I mean, that automated concession certainly came up from water in our forum. Sarah's points are really well made around sort of that question about what about the water companies or corporations, I should say, and what they're doing. I mean, in my head, I've got to say, I think getting the energy retailers in a room, for mine, it's not just about satisfying their entirely legitimate concerns. It's actually also about holding them to account and pinning them down for what they're failing to do well in a fairly open process. So yeah, and maybe involving the water people will help highlight sort of the differential in the standards of performance that they have in this area.
One of the things I would note in relation to water and energy as far as the ERGs go, I'm a huge fan of the businesses helping fill out the ERGs form, huge advocate for it. The reality is, though, it can take up to 25 minutes to do that over the phone with a customer. It is a really, really time-consuming process, and the system component of that can add some additional complexities in. So I'll just flag from the perspective of, and there is we also hear energy versus water, it's a different number of how many they're doing. But it does, a lot of the feedback we've been getting is there's that current issue around customers not being able to get through to energy retailers for payment arrangements. And when you add an additional 20+ minutes per call for an ERG, it does have an impact. So I think that it's just worth flagging that there is a difference in numbers, but there is also the water businesses have probably been doing it a bit longer, but they will also tell you that it is a huge amount of time that takes to do it over the phone. But it also is the most effective way that they have found of getting those across the line. So just flagging that.
Yeah, and the energy businesses are being paid to do this.
Yes. Can I just add, I would agree with that in terms of information from ourselves. With the last year's applications that we did receive in ERGs, 74.6% to our water utilities that we received in comparison to electricity, which was 38.1 and 35.8 for gas. So that's quite a large gap that we can see for water companies that we work well with.
Thanks for all those reflections, and thank you, Lola, for giving DHHS's input into this. Really appreciate you being here and hearing all of this as well. Sarah, can we take this on notice in terms of being able to think about another opportunity coming up that we could perhaps get the businesses together, water and energy, DHHS and some community health sector representatives together to sort of flesh out this further and see what other opportunities there are to streamline what seems to be working well in water, but we just need to sort of see what we can do in energy as well. Can we take that on board and have a think about that internally and come back to everybody?
No, for sure. And we have obviously already run sort of that type of workshop as part during that reform process, where the energy retailers heard directly from the water businesses on how to go about doing this process. We've also scheduled to discuss this with the managers of all the CEOs of all the energy businesses too at our upcoming industry roundtable. But definitely there's workshops planned as well. And just for everybody's awareness too, we do have scheduled sort of further compliance guidance coming out regarding our expectations on certain elements of the payment difficulty framework and family violence framework, and we'll be using those workshops to go through that compliance guidance, but also the new ERG entitlements.
Certainly, thanks, Sarah, and I'll certainly pick up on this theme when we talk to the industry in that roundtable that's coming up as well. That was an interesting discussion on ERGs. I just wanted to touch base then on disconnections and the approach going forward. So thank you, Patrick, for raising that, and understand the AER are moving towards their third iteration coming up shortly. So pleasingly, as you're probably aware, there have been no disconnections in Victoria since April, and that's been really great to see customers remain connected and energy businesses take a very positive approach to that. We've been continuing to monitor that issue, as you know, through the data collection and with lots and lots of conversations with the industry. So thanks to Sarah and her team for that. And we've been talking to them more recently too about what their approach to disconnections will look like as restrictions start to ease in Victoria. and I guess as people and businesses come back to life. So we've been focusing on this as well, knowing that the AER are going to revisit their statement of expectations. And I wanted to share with you today some options of what our proposed approach might look like, which Commission will be thinking about shortly. So I think as we transition into the next phase, it's going to be really important, given what we've heard this morning about some issues in relation to customers being able to engage with their businesses, and I guess the quantum of those payment plans too that I've heard this afternoon. So Sarah, that might be something we can sort of focus on with the businesses as well in terms of how they're meeting their obligations under the PDF. Because the quantum of the payment plan, if that's not being adhered to, would be sort of then the next step to move towards a disconnection cycle, which if they haven't had that opportunity to put forward an appropriate payment plan quantum, then that's just, I guess going to be a downfall in the cycle. So we don't want to see that happen. So with all of that in mind, the proposed approach that we're thinking about at Commission is that retailers won't be disconnecting customers who are engaging. So I guess there's that engagement piece there that remains a very critical point that I think that we need to be very focused on and have our ear to the ground about what's happening there if there are any problems. So don't disconnect customers who are engaging, and I guess a residential customer who's known to be isolating or quarantining as a result of COVID-19, that would be a situation in which there would be no disconnection, and we're thinking about requiring retailers to attempt to contact the customer to confirm that, given we'll be coming out of these more stringent restrictions shortly. I guess the PDF framework, does require those multiple communications from businesses. And so, as I said, I think we'll be having to focus very carefully on how businesses seek to engage with their customers through that cycle. If a customer has been disconnected for non-payment, I think the AER's position has been if the customer reconnects them immediately, if the customer contacts them, there's a waiver of all those disconnection and other fees. And I think that that's a very sensible way forward to make sure that reconnection can happen without detriment to the customer and as quickly as possible. We're also looking at, and it's been picked up in the conversation this afternoon, looking at the issue of debt referrals and debt collection. And the potential for collection activities to not be occurring over the next, the months to come. So putting a ban on the collection of debt, given some of the themes we've heard today, seems like something we really need to apply our mind to, and a very sensible approach as well. Again, I think this really highlights the importance of customers who are struggling to pay their bills being able to engage with their retailers. So we're really keen to keep hearing from you about what that experience is like, and we'll be focusing on that with the businesses. And really, it's that critical role that your organisations play in facilitating that engagement for the most vulnerable in the community. So, as always, we're here to listen to any concerns as we move sort of out of these restrictions and things ease up a little bit. So, I hope that gives you a feel for where we think we will be heading, and I think it's been a really excellent balance that's been struck in Victoria since April of keeping customers connected, but also making sure that those customers who can pay do pay. So that's been a good balance to strike, and I think it'll be a really critical area that we need to focus on as we come through the coming months. Sarah, was there anything else you'd like to add to that on our current thinking, and what else we might be doing?
Yes, I suppose the other point to make, again, this is still our initial thinking, is that if the retailers were to, any retailer who wants to commence the disconnection process will have to start from the start, in the sense they would have to commence from the next billing cycle, where you would have to go obviously through that process of seeking to offer the customer assistance, as well as Kate mentioned, seeking to clarify whether or not that customer is isolating or quarantining as a result of COVID-19. And the other reflection to make would be, we have had, we've been in a constant conversation with industry over the past, how many months, 6 or 7 months. So you may have not seen a public statement of expectations, but certainly there has been lots of engagement with industry regarding what Commission views are in relation to disconnection practices in Victoria. So I think that don't think that we haven't been doing stuff in this space. That there is a reason why you're seeing the numbers that you're seeing today. Cynthia, I just noticed you had a sort of question in the chat regarding debt collection. Yes, the intention would be, again, you know, this is not a Commission decision, but the intention would be to prohibit the referral of debt to external agencies for existing as well as former customers.
So any final bills couldn't be referred out. Okay, thanks. I know it's not a decision yet, but there's no
decision. These are staff views that are being reflected in a public forum. And no, what do you call it? Default credit listing.
Yeah. Okay.
Can I ask
at a later point?
Sorry.
Not in this forum. Can I have a chat with you about the final build, like the past accounts and the lack of payment difficulty assistance if they're entitled to, and the delay in debt collection and maybe unintended consequences of having people carry a default listing for an extended period of time from the time that the debt's accrued, but we can chat about that at another point.
For sure.
Thanks, Cynthia, and thanks, Sarah. Sorry, Jared, did you want to add something into the conversation there?
Yeah, I just wondered, I mean, I think that prohibition on referral to a debt collector is good. It'd be good to think also whether the regulator can use its powers around misleading conduct when a retailer says that they're going to outsource it to a debt collector, because what we see, it's the threat. It may not do it, but it's the threat. And likewise with disconnection, when retailers have a policy not to disconnect, telling people that they will disconnect them is misleading conduct. And so whether there's an opportunity to take a regulatory action there.
Thanks, Jared. If we were an ACL regulator, maybe, but we could possibly talk very closely with CAV about that very issue. So thank you for raising it, and we will certainly take that up with CAV. And thank you, Cynthia, too. We will certainly engage with you on that aspect. So I wonder if we can move on from that topic now. I do think maybe, is Emma from CPRC, did you want to give a general update too before we move on to the next session about the survey work you've been doing?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Kate. And I thought it might be a good moment as part of this, following on from this discussion, to raise some of this recent survey data. Because I think, I mean, I'm somewhat concerned that perhaps there's a perception on the part of some providers in Victoria that once the economy reopens, kind of normal life can resume. And what we're very clearly seeing in our survey data, which is a national survey, is that you know, there's the effect of the COVID restrictions, and then there's the fact that we're in a recession, and that's playing out nationally. So we've got you know, very elevated levels of concern about financial wellbeing. They're really stuck at sort of 65%, and we're seeing that in the most recent data. So that's nationwide. They are higher in Victoria, not surprisingly. And we are seeing continued concern about energy bills nationwide as well. So that's at around sort of 30% of Australians are concerned about paying their energy bills. We are seeing, and this has obviously been the case, as many of you know, since we started this survey, that concerns are greater among some subgroups. So yesterday we put out our September data snapshot, which looked at renters and mortgage holders. So around half of renters are concerned about paying their energy bills, likewise their rent, which I think in many cases has a flow-on effect to energy bill payment as well. And you know, taking on credit at much higher rates than the general population just to manage those household expenses and missing their energy payments. So around 9% of renters are missing their energy payments. So I just wanted to reinforce, it's nationwide data. So even once those restrictions lift, the financial pressures remain. And maybe we've seen some interesting stuff with the New South Wales data too, and we have speculated, like, why is this the case? And it may be that, I guess perhaps reality hits businesses once the restrictions lift and you see who survives and who doesn't, and sort of the labour market impacts and things like that. So I think there's just a few things coming down the line that we need to be prepared for in Victoria. And just a shout out too that our previous In Focus group for August was people with disability who are facing greater bill pressures as well, including energy bills. So there's just a few things just to consider, and that's all on our website now if people want to access that, and I can send around a link in the chat.
Kate, it's Dominic. Can I concur with Emma? It's exactly what we're hearing as well from a small business and contractors point of view. The impact hasn't hit Victoria yet, and as soon as we start to open up, we're not sure who's going to be back.
Thanks for that, Dominic. It's good for us to know that when we run this survey.
Great, thanks Dominic, and thanks very much Emma for that update and the survey work that CPRCC is doing, very valuable, so thank you.
Thank you, Kate.
We've come to the end of that session, but I realise that we've only had general updates from sort of CPRC then and CALC. Did Brotherhood of St Lawrence or Financial Counselling Victoria want to make any other comments as by way of general update that you didn't get an opportunity for up front?
I've got a couple of comments from the Brotherhood perspective, just kind of relating to what Patrick and Gerard were saying about the experiences of consumers that they had noticed today. So we have staff calling up the retailer multiple times a day and multiple staff doing that. So lots of engagements with the retailer and the participant. And just two early trends that we've noticed. The first is not a noticeable difference in retailers assisting customers with the utility relief grant forms. So just some inconsistency across the retailers, with some seeming to have the capacity to be more proactive in assisting customers, but in other cases us having to be quite forceful in our advocacy to get them to provide that assistance that they're now required to. And also just, I suppose, re-emphasising the point around payment plans. From our experience to date, the retailers don't seem to be taking into a lot of consideration what is affordable for the customer, but are saying this is what you need to pay. And again, it's kind of our advocacy is needing to be quite strong to try and negotiate something that is manageable for the customer. Thanks.
Thanks very much, Emma and David from Brotherhood of St Lawrence. Sandy or Lynn, did you want to add anything into the conversation before we move on? All good. There was one thing I was interested just to ask out of that conversation. There seemed to be a sense that there was a different treatment by retailers, by a customer reaching out versus a financial counsellor, and different outcomes and an inconsistency. I'm sorry, I forgot who raised that in the conversation, but just out of interest, is that because you get given to a different team within the retailer when you ring up via a financial counsellor than a consumer themselves, or is that just an inconsistency generally?
I would say it's a general inconsistency. I mean, there's some differentials in terms of who financial counsellors might speak to, but I've heard many examples given of customers who've self-advocated with a retailer, who've been offered something inadequate or just that's not going to get them very far, who then go through a financial counsellor, or sometimes they're even told to go to a financial counsellor by the retailer. And then the financial counsellor comes with the same scenario and so forth, and then a much more appropriate kind of outcome comes through. That's an often told kind of story. It's quite an endemic kind of issue, I think.
Right, thanks very much for sharing that, Sandy.
And also that financial counsellors keep escalating. So when they're not happy with the decision, they know how to escalate to someone who's got a bit more authority to make decisions that are more favourable.
Thanks, Lynn. Simon, did you want to add something in there?
Yeah, I just want to ask a question about, Sandy, you mentioned the challenge with getting authorisations for counsellors to act on behalf of your clients. And I think, Carl, you also mentioned that to us when you briefed us on a related project yesterday. Are there any examples, is this about their systematic processes? And if so, are there particular retailers that are doing it well, so we can sort of highlight that to other retailers and say, look, it can be made simple? Or are they all very difficult to get those sort of authorisations?
Yeah, good question, Simon. My sense is it's not just one or two. It's a bit more widespread than that as a problem, and yep. I get the sense it's a systemic kind of issue. I think we need to kind of dig into and do some sort of concentrated data collection to kind of get more of a handle on it. That's all I can think of to say at the moment, but others might have stuff to add in.
Just if you have any good examples that from your digging in, that would be helpful, because as you know, we've used the example of the water sector doing things well in some examples to put pressure on other retailers to step up the mark. So if you have examples of where people have got good processes, that could be very helpful.
Some of what we heard, Simon, in the FCVIC forum was where retailers were, they all record their calls, where they could do that authority form, the authority in a recorded call where they had the client with them. They recorded that call, whereas some organisations are saying, no, we can't do it over a phone call. You have to have it signed, which obviously in the COVID context is impossible or exceptionally difficult at least. So there were some, and I'm going to say, which I could be wrong with, I think in the group I was in, I think Energy Australia was saying they do it over the phone. There are definitely some who don't, and it's unnecessary barriers. And I know there was a big call out after FCVIC's forum to how we could actually come up with a standardised approach across the energy sector. So again, if that's something that the Commission is interested in getting involved in, I think it would be fantastic for financial counsellors, because it's an unnecessary complication.
We definitely want to empower you to be able to help your clients. So, Sarah, that might be something we can look at, because it would seem that we get the calls when we have issues later on, so we accept that as a record of what's gone on. So,
can I just ask Kira and perhaps Cynthia, just working virtually from home, people taking calls from home, is that I've sort of understood that that's the call recording capability is less accessible when people are taking calls from home? That's not the case?
It depends on your system setup. All our calls are still recorded while at home. So I would assume a somewhat functional business that's larger than EWOV should also have similar technical capability, but I wouldn't want to bet my house on it.
It didn't come up in the workshop, Lucy, that call recording was a problem during COVID. So I'm not sure if it is or isn't, but it didn't come up that it was a problem. But even, sometimes financial counsellors are sending a confirmation through via email without a signature, but it's coming from, a financial counselling organisation. It's pretty clear it's a financial counsellor working on behalf of the client. They're still not accepting it. So there might be a couple of ways it can be done, but the current way of no alignment is clearly not helpful to financial counsellors in the field.
Thank you. That's very helpful. I think that sounds like an area where there's some work to be done.
Great. Thanks, Simon and everyone. I seen a couple of hands up before we move to the next session. Jared, did you have your hand up before I go to Gerard?
Thanks, Kate. I did. I've just popped it in the chat. The point about the multiple contacts and the escalating contacts, I think is an important one. And I just mentioned that I raised it at the Energy Charter's Independent Assessment Panel stakeholder forum today, because I think there's potential for a measure of effectiveness there of retailer practice. I also want to endorse Jared's point about thinking about other ways of ensuring that practice and scripts are meeting standards. But I think there's some great work being done by the organisations funded for the targeted assistance, and thinking about how we could promote it through other channels. It might be that the CEO's forum that you'll have in a week or two's time. It's an opportunity to hear a bit about these other ways the energy companies could connect people with good services.
Yeah, very, very good point, Jared. Thank you very much. We'll certainly take up that opportunity in a couple of weeks' time. That's great. Jared, did you have your hand up?
No, I'm fine, thanks.
Sure, all good. Thank you for that discussion. Given the time, we might move on to the next session, but can I say thank you to Ting for providing an overview and to all the presenters in that discussion. I think that was really worthwhile to get the word out and understand where some additional opportunities might be for the Commission as well as others around the table. So thank you. Might just now turn to Katie from Justice Connect. And Katie, I think you're going to talk about the work you're with a focus on housing and financial security. Can I hand over to you? Thanks, Katie.
Yeah, no worries. Thank you. And I'm actually going to share my screen. So just give me 1 second. Just got some visual cues so you don't have to kind of look at my face the whole time. Yeah, so my name's Katie Ho. I'm the Senior Project Lawyer at Justice Connect in the Homeless Law team. So we'll be sharing some of our experiences and information that we've gathered, particularly through our digital tool, Dear Landlord, and I'll explain a bit about what that is, about how COVID-19 has been affecting renters. So I've just put this here. It's just a really brief background on homeless law. A lot of you or probably already know us, but essentially we're a legal service for people experiencing a risk of homelessness. So we focus on trying to prevent evictions into homelessness, and also the other side of the coin, which is removing barriers for people trying to exit homelessness and stopping the criminalisation of homelessness. And our key areas of law are tenancy, so eviction prevention, dealing with fines, debts, and some criminal law issues as well. So we created our first digital tool about 2 years ago, which is called Dear Landlord. We created Dear Landlord based on what we were seeing through one of our specific projects called the Women's Homelessness Prevention Project. That is an intensive legal representation project where each client, along with receiving ongoing casework, they also get support from one of our in-house social workers to tackle their, other issues, so financial, health, employment, any other kind of non-legal support that they need. And the aim is to ensure that they're set up to maintain that tenancy going forward, so it's not kind of this cycle of, potentially being evicted and then saving and then being evicted again, to really stabilize people in that housing. So the majority of the women that we helped through that project were behind in rent. And, it can be something as simple as an unexpected expense like a car or, a doctor's bill or paying for the kids to do something. And, more generally, rent arrears was the easiest way to evict someone. So you could receive a notice to vacate if you were just 2 weeks behind in rent. So we wanted to use this information and our expertise to create a really practical tool that empowered renters to understand their rights about the law. So then the renters who were able to could take those steps to advocate for themselves. And renters who couldn't self-help would kind of would be off-ramped into our more like intensive support and representation. So this is the original, the first version, and the kind of main aim of it was to generate. It was a letter writer, which helped renters to generate a tailored letter to their landlord to offer a payment plan to address their outstanding arrears. And the letter was different depending on which stage of the eviction process they were at. And also accompanying that tool was some other kind of information. So as you can see there was also a video that explained the eviction process, so people could understand what they were looking at, and also help them identify where in the process they were so they could use that, generate the correct letter for them. Sorry, I'm just trying to change the slide, but I can't for some reason. Sorry. I'll just go back into that again. Okay. 1 second.
Katie, do you want me to give it a shot? I've got it ready to go.
I think I've got it this time. There we go. Thank you for that. Bit of trial and error. So in terms of Dear Landlord, in April we saw a huge spike in people using it, corresponding with the first lockdown, which is where you can see where restrictions began. And we started to see an emerging cohort of renters facing financial hardship and financial insecurity because of COVID-19, which is pretty clear. And it was interesting for us because our existing cohort of clients have often been homeless or on the brink of homelessness, and they may have regularly experienced financial and housing insecurity over periods of time, or in some cases for most of their lives, you know, particularly due to the issues around a lack of affordable housing. So we started seeing renters using Dear Landlord, but also accessing our service who were struggling, who had never been at risk of homelessness before. And, you know, in our experiences, people who haven't experienced financial or housing insecurity often have less experience seeking help, so have, you know, struggled to find appropriate support services. And on top of that, many people see tenancy issues as financial problems and not legal problems. And they obviously go hand in hand. And, you know, those issues can be early warning signs that can lead to kind of entrenched poverty. So we were really learning a lot through how people were using Dear Landlord and what we were seeing, particularly because people, and I'll show you this in a second, but people can input the reasons why they're being impacted or what has happened to them that has led to their housing insecurity. And that's just a huge, like, amazing insight into the kinds of issues that people are struggling with. And I'll share some of that as well, because I think it's really interesting. So we redeveloped Dear Landlord to accommodate the kind of unique needs of renters during COVID, and, you know, with the new COVID tenancy laws that came into place, so that people could understand the new rights that they had, particularly because it was quite complex. So I still don't know how, but we managed to get that up and running within a couple of months. So the second iteration of Dear Landlord is specifically for people who have been affected by COVID, who are struggling with rent-related issues. So you can see here on the left of the screen, this is kind of the starting point. So tell us your situation. And then people self-identify what they're wanting. So, you know, I want to negotiate for a rent reduction. My landlord won't negotiate. I want to change or end a rent reduction agreement. You know, my landlord has taken action against me, or I want to end my lease agreement. So the main thing that Dear Landlord now does is it generates tailored letters for renters to their landlords to negotiate a rent reduction. It can also help generate a rent reduction agreement to lodge with CAV. And it also just gives renters a lot of information about the other processes. So whether it's conciliation, whether it's ending a lease, you know, whether they have to go to VCAT, So it gives all that information to people who are using it. So as you can see on the right are some of the, example COVID-19 reasons that are built into the app. And then there's, a way for people to write what their own experiences are. And this is a version of the rent reduction letter that it generates. So the renters can then, they can amend it and then they can send it off to their landlords however they want to, whether it's by email or an attachment or, use part of it. So essentially it's just outlining that they're proposing a rent reduction between these dates and the reasons why they're experiencing hardship during this COVID period. And with this, where a tenant can download this letter, we've also included a number of resources and also a number of resources throughout Dear Landlord, links to get financial help, links to access the rent reduction, the rent utilities scheme, the rent relief grant, sorry, and also legal, where people can get legal help as well. So in terms of what we have been seeing through Dear Landlord, most of the people who've used Dear Landlord have said that they've been impacted because of reduced employment, so that's 65%, or they lost work entirely, so that's 35%. Some of the other top reasons that were that people were struggling to find new housemates, or previous housemates had left due to COVID, and some people said that they were impacted because they were caring for family members as well. So, we're seeing really clear connections between employment related matters and then financial issues, which are then causing these tenancy problems and putting people at risk of homelessness, essentially. Dear Landlord has been up since July, so we're hoping to have a better picture of how people are using it in the coming months. In terms of our service delivery, so this is what is related to the graph that is on screen at the moment. So despite the eviction moratorium, evictions are still a really big concern for us. As you can see in this infographic, the majority of inquiries to homeless law for tenancy help are related to evictions. So in August, 75% of tenants' inquiries were for evictions, and 17% of those were for rent arrears, despite a clear direction from the government to landlords to act in good faith during the pandemic. And I know that some of this information has been recently kind of highlighted by a couple of reports that have been released around how renters are still struggling with eviction during this time. So we've seen landlords refusing to negotiate for a rent reduction agreement, and more tenants are kind of needing assistance from CAV through the dispute resolution scheme to negotiate those agreements or extend them. Also, the extra pressure being placed on renters in August because renters are trying to negotiate, trying to deal with expiring rent reduction agreements, as well as, cuts to job seeker and JobKeeper rates that were coming up, in September. So we've seen, the legal and social issues for our clients are facing are presenting in these really classic clusters. So tenancy concerns linked to employment and financial problems. And so we're really focused going forward for the next iteration of Dear Landlord to address these issues in together, so we can kind of develop more kind of effective solutions rather than just focusing on the legal, which, as a lawyer, it feels like the priority, but actually we do need to kind of zoom out and see how we can deal with all of these issues. I guess I wanted to share that across all of our programs at Justice Connect, we're seeing these financial concerns presenting as legal problems like bankruptcy and tenancy matters. So with our other resources that we do have online, you know, we've seen increased engagement with, you know, the ones to do with financial problems or dealing with debts. So in particular, there's been a huge increase in people accessing our bankruptcy resources, and interestingly, more young people. So up between 18 and 24, there's been a particular increase. There's also been an increase in women accessing our solving financial problems during COVID fact sheets, which kind of, you know, reflects the data that shows that job losses have predominantly hit industries dominated by female workforces. So I feel like I've talked really fast, but I feel like there's a lot of information that I really wanted to share. So in looking forward, you know, housing, financial insecurity and employment are all connected. So we want to use Dear Landlord to help connect renters with those other services, to help people kind of further upstream before they're even on the brink of homelessness or thinking about losing their housing. So we're also worried, as it seems everyone is and has been touched on by a number of people already, that about what happens in April when the COVID protections across tenancies and other sectors are no longer in place. So we're really trying to prepare for that, because we will be developing a new version of Dear Landlord to coincide with the new rental reforms in March, April. And so we're looking at how we can more seamlessly incorporate kind of the financial and employment resources and potentially off-ramp users directly to supports within Dear Landlord, so that they're kind of addressing their housing, financial, all the things that are interconnected together in some way. And just making it super easy for people to get help. So yeah, that's I just thought that it kind of ties into a lot of the work that has been done, it seems, by everyone here already. I've shared the link, so you can have a play with Dear Landlord if you want. You can get in contact with me if you have any ideas, and I'm really keen to hear about how we can kind of build in more of those financial supports in when people are trying to deal with their housing issues, because they're obviously really interrelated. Yeah.
Great. Can I say thank you very much, Katie? That was very informative, and sorry that the time went so fast and you felt like you had to go through it quickly, but I think that was a great way for everybody to digest what Justice Connect is doing in this area. There's probably not any time for questions given it's 4:30 on the dot, but Katie, are you happy for us to share your slides around to the attendees today, and that will have, I imagine, your contact details on it so people can reach out with any queries or get more information?
Yeah, that's not a problem. And actually, I just realised that I didn't put my email or phone on there. So maybe someone can just, I'm happy for my email to be circulated. So with those slides, so that's not a problem.
Great, thank you. Well, Jess and Kat will get onto that so that we can share that. So thank you very much for your time today, Katie. Given the time too, I was going to give a quick update from the Commission, but we did cover off on the main topic that I wanted to update you on, which was disconnections anyway, but the team will send something around just in terms of the other update I was going to give. So given it's 4:31, I just wanted to say thank you to everyone for making the time to be part of our 6th Community Sector Roundtable. Some of the key issues I've just heard quickly from you today, just to recap. Some inconsistent outcomes for consumers is an ongoing issue, particularly in relation to payment difficulty support, affordable payment options and authorisation. Still some challenges, obviously, with ERGs that we've heard, and opportunities to collaborate and streamline, and we've committed to exploring this further, so thank you for raising that today. Concern about the digital divide, especially household access to technology and for older consumers. Kira, you mentioned the increase in food assistance and that being an indicator that as measures of support drop off, people really are finding themselves in increasingly difficult financial circumstances. And also once the restrictions lift, there'll be a clearer picture of the ongoing impacts for consumers and small businesses that we heard from Dominic, and some will only become apparent as things open up further. So we've got a way to go, and I think from my perspective, holding these roundtables will continue to be extremely valuable. So I hope that you feel the same. Please give any feedback to Jess and Kat about that. As usual, we'll be doing a write-up of the event, and please feel free to reach out to Kat, Jess, Sarah, or any of our team to follow up on anything after today's discussion. I think we've got another roundtable scheduled, one more before the end of the year, next month. So we hope to see you then, if not before. Thanks for everyone's participation and time. Stay well and take care. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks.